People who are against electric cars, they're saying that brake dust is worse for your health than diesel emissions. They're using a recent study to claim that actually brake dust is going to kill you faster than diesel, and that's a good reason for why you shouldn't bother buying an electric car. This study is actually kind of ridiculous. It proves that electric cars are the solution here, because most people with electric cars don't really use their brakes. I don't think these haters actually understand that. Here's what CarScoop said. Electric cars are hailed by many supporters as a key tool for reducing global warming, as well as making our air cleaner to breathe. But EVs are not the panacea some think they are. New research suggests brake dust, which is emitted by both EVs and ICE cars, is so toxic that it's more harmful than sucking up a lungful of rolling coal. Now, of course, people who are stupid will read this and think, yeah, told you electric cars are a bad idea. But obviously, that's because they don't understand what an electric car actually is or how people drive them. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to have you with us. Let's get straight into it. Diesel cars, there's nothing you can do. Petrol, gasoline-powered cars, nothing you can do. The emissions that come out of the tailpipe and the emissions that come out of the tailpipe. But, of course, many people do remove those emissions filters from their vehicles. You can smell it when you're in your car. You can see it in the sky with diesel cars in particular. Very common, extremely common for people to remove their filters from their cars. And this study doesn't examine the true effects of the cars on the road today. So the majority of the cars on the road today pollute a huge amount of emissions come out of those exhausts. This is just comparing new, much more modern internal combustion engine cars, which, to be honest, usually they mislead you. I mean, why is it that almost every car brand in the world has been convicted of lying about the emissions from their cars, right? Nearly all of them have been convicted, come to settlements for lying about the emissions coming from their exhaust pipes. So the study's a little bit flawed to begin with from that. Secondly, the study's also flawed because it doesn't take into account the fact that electric cars, every electric car that I'm aware of that's on sale here and in Australia, most electric cars in China, nearly all of them have regen braking. Most people who sell their electric cars will say this in their advertisement on their used electric car. They'll say, still on the same set of brake pads, or I've replaced the brake pads once in 300,000 kilometers, 200,000 miles of driving, one replacement of the brake pads, or sometimes never replace the brake pads. Guys, look at this long mile Facebook clubs where people talk about how much range they've done on electric cars. People will often post saying, I've done more than 150,000 miles, never replaced the brake pads on my electric car. I've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times. So why are people not replacing their brake pads on their cars? Is it because those brake pads are amazing? No, it's simply because people don't use them. In fact, a big problem with electric cars, and this actually is a problem, is the rotors. So the part that the brake pad hits on your car, the rotors will often rust. Very common. Look at an electric car, look at the rotors on the wheels, and they'll be rusted. Why are they getting rusted? Because people aren't using them. If you commonly use your rotors, then they don't rust. Now, it's not actually a huge problem, to be honest. It doesn't really matter that much. But the truth is, the reason they rust is because people aren't really using their brake pads. Most people don't. And if they do use their brake pads, it's a very minimal amount. They'll use a combination of regen braking and brakes and their actual, normal brakes. Me personally, I would say less than 5% of my braking is done by using my traditional brakes in my electric car. At least 95% is done through regen braking. Now, this is one of the reasons why I say if your car that you're buying has really weak regen braking, your electric car, don't buy it. There's other options that are better. But anyhow, the point is this. Most electric car owners use their brakes much, 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 much less than internal combustion engine vehicle owners, or entirely not at all. A lot of Tesla owners don't use their brake pads at all, ever. They use one pedal driving, which means they only use their accelerator to brake. And when you lift off the accelerator, the regen braking will simply recharge your battery. So it's a double positive, right? You're braking by simply using regen brakes to send electricity straight back into your battery pack. And this does not create any brake pad dust whatsoever. So carscoops.com, actually the solution to the global panacea, global warming, air cleaner to breathe. EVs are not the panacea, something they are. Actually, it is. They are. EVs have regen braking, and in particular the newer ones. All the newer ones, the regen braking is better and better and better and better. It's becoming a much more commonly used feature in EVs. Now, here's what the article had to say. Considering EVs are significantly heavier than their internal combustion counterparts, except plug-in hybrids. They said, oh, except plug-in hybrids, they're not. Is this actually true? Well, I've said this many times. No, it's not true. My car, the Xpeng G6, it's pretty similar weight. It's 2,000 kilograms, around 4,200 pounds. Pretty similar weight to internal combustion engine cars that are that size. Tesla Model Y, pretty similar weight to internal combustion cars that size. Same with the Tesla Model 3. It weighs about 1,800 kilograms, which is about 3,800 pounds, which is actually lighter than a Mercedes-Benz C-Class. What about, say, a mid-sized electric SUV, something a bit smaller than a Tesla Model Y? Geely's EX5, right? That's a really popular car in China. It's now being globally released. Geely say they're going to be selling that car in 60 different countries. What's the weight? 1,650 kilograms, right? It's exactly the same size, this car, as a Toyota RAV4. In fact, it's slightly bigger than a Toyota RAV4. Guess what the weight of a Toyota RAV4 is? 1,800 kilograms. It's 150 kilograms lighter. So the claim that EVs are so much heavier, I mean, Republicans are saying, Republican senators, 11 of them have signed a document claiming that electric cars weigh triple the weight of an internal combustion engine car. That is completely false. Brake pad toxins, the dirty secret of stopping power. Scientists from the University of Southampton in the UK looked at the effect on lung health of emissions particulates from different types of brake pads. One type of pad has a low metallic composition, while the other three were semi-metallic, non-asbestos, organic, and hybrid ceramic. Normally, we'd associate things that are with the organic label as being healthier for us, but in tests, the non-asbestos organic pads induced the most inflammation. They were assessed as even more toxic to human lungs than diesel emissions. According to the study's authors, it's these kinds of pads that are most common in the US because they're cheap, quiet, and have a fairly low wear rate. Now, I should point out these comparisons with the emissions of diesel don't take into account other things other than lung effect, like cancer. How do those particulates actually affect the rest of your body? So this study is a fairly limited study. Developed to replace older asbestos-containing brake pads, they contain copper fibers, which improve thermal conductivity, something the asbestos previously provided. Asbestos was removed from the mix because of its links to cancer, lung disease, but the copper dust in the modern pads was also linked to lung ailments like cancer, asthma, and chronic pulmonary disease. California and Washington in the US have both passed laws to reduce copper content in brake pads, though the report says this was pushed through with an eye on eradicating runoff and protecting aquatic life rather than protecting our lungs, which is kind of insane. Euro 7 emissions regulations that come into play in 2026 will start to limit brake dust emissions, though presumably that will only affect new cars and not parts available for existing ones. As things stand, there's very little regulation around the world governing non-tailpipe vehicle emissions. In other words, emissions from tyres and brakes. And obviously tyres are another source of emissions. Now, CarScoop said this: EVs do use regenerative braking, but they also have conventional friction brakes, so they do produce brake dust. And they tend to be heavier than ICE, meaning they produce more tyre pollution. Now, this is actually a valid point. It's valid that some EVs are around 10%, maybe 20% heavier than internal combustion vehicles at the max. And therefore, they are likely to have more tyre pollution. That's true. But when it comes to dust pollution from brakes, well, most EVs don't have any at all, to be honest. I mean, majority of EVs on the roads today in the Western world are about 70% of them are Teslas today. That's the truth. Just from previous sales, Tesla was dominating that market. So that would mean around 70% of those cars have the ability for full regen braking. Most of them probably being driven on that setting because why not? People get used to it and they actually love being able to do that. In fact, a lot of people say, I'm only going to buy another car that's not a Tesla if it has full one-pedal regen braking. I've seen this posted hundreds of times on social media. Getting back to the point here. With an EV with regen braking, you don't have to use your brakes or very, very limited amount. In other words, that's going to mean that actual brake dust pollution from electric cars will be far, far lower on average than from internal combustion. And this is yet another reason why we should support electric cars and promote them, and my governments should be subsidizing them. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree in the comments. Thanks for watching.